So my name is Dee Matthew. I'm one of the area organisers with the EIS, and I've been working alongside West Dunbartonshire Local Association on and off for the last 7 years. So Mick and Jim wanted to put this meeting together today just to provide an update, as Mick said, on the Stand Up for Quality Education campaign in West Dunbartonshire, but really focus it on teacher empowerment to manage workload and also to demand safer and healthier workplaces. So that's really the focus of today. So the Stand Up for Quality Education campaign was launched in 2022 at EIS AGM. And this was this primary strategic aim of this campaign. So that was to significantly improve teachers' working conditions and health, safety and well-being at work. And by doing so, improve the quality of learning experience for teachers. So really chiefly within that was looking at health, safety and well-being of teachers. Now you might have seen this key campaign aim before. You might be seeing it for the first time just now, but teachers are very much at the centre of what this campaign is focused on, and your working environments and how you experience that is very much central to it. The reach was to build a wide alliance of support for government and local authorities to prioritise education and, most importantly, to increase funding for education and deliver on promises. Now, if we briefly go back actually just to a time of pre-COVID, you might remember that the EIS had a focus on basically holding the Scottish Government employers to account on their commitment to teacher empowerment and agency. Now, this was a focus that all stakeholders were signed up to, and you can see from these two slides that I've taken from a previous campaign presentation that there is a raft of agency that signed up to ensuring that teacher empowerment was key within the sector, that you were having a say in how your workplaces were run and how you were experiencing those workplaces, and that you were involved in consideration of that across all facets of your workplace. So in 2018, you'd won on pay. So by 2019, you'd pivoted to empowerment and the Time to Tackle Workload campaign. Then COVID hit, and that sort of put the kibosh on that. And when you come back, the focus again was on pay, and you had a massive win on pay before you launched Stand Up for Quality Education in the August of 2022. Now, you'll know, I hope, that it's across 3 strands of workload, additional support needs, and pupil behaviour. So these were the key elements that when your colleagues were out talking to teachers in their workplaces right through all of this previous campaigning from the 2018 pay campaign forward, that the issues that you were talking about within your workplaces were related to workload, were related to the rise in pupils with additional support needs and the workload that was creating, and also in the experiences of increase in violent and aggressive pupil behaviour, and again the impact that was having on workload for you. So that campaign was launched across these 3 strands. Now, if you go onto the EIS website, they have a little bit of an update on each of these 3 strands. And that's what I've taken these quotes from in terms of what they've been working on through workloads, through additional support needs, and through pupil behaviour. But straight from the horse's mouth today, I've just came from a meeting with the General Secretary, and she'd kind of given a rundown on all of the things that's happening around the Stand Up for Quality Education campaign at the moment. So she talked about the advice that's went out for teachers along pupil behaviour, and we will pivot back towards that in some of the upcoming slides. She's talked about the work that's happening nationally in terms of the reduction in class contact hours, specifically to the 21 hours. It's in the manifesto commitment of the current Scottish Government. And that requires an increase in teachers to support this focus on reducing class contact hours. So that's all still in train, and these conversations are happening nationally on your behalf with your employers and with the Scottish Government and COSLA. There's also been a very positive movement at a meeting on the workload survey that Scottish Government had done, and there's movement on there. There's been lots of lobbying pre-budget Massive lobbying on holding the Scottish Government to account on their manifesto promise, as I mentioned, of reducing class contact to 21 hours. Also with the SNCT Teachers Panel, they have done work supported by a press release that went out just last week, pushing the Scottish Government to ensure that the upcoming budget, reflected funding to fund this manifesto commitment. There's also going to be an announcement on the budget on Scottish Parliament related to this tomorrow, if you want to keep your eye on that. Also tomorrow, there is a parliamentary event that the Cabinet Secretary and COSLA are attending. Also lots of key stakeholders and key partners. And that ASN event is a lobbying opportunity again for your union. And it's being held by two MSPs, Pam Duncan Glancy and another MSP, but will also be attended by Willie Rennie, I beg your pardon, by a raft of other MSPs, which you have been lobbying up into the budget meeting on the 4th of December. So lots of activity around the issues around ASN within Stand Up for Quality Education. Also, something we're going to circle back to as well is that there's an all-member survey. Typically, you do these in December. That's going to come out, but it's going to be incorporating a number of strands of work and key workload that came out of this year's AGM resolutions as well. So that's all the things that are going on nationally at the moment in terms of Stand Up for Quality Education. But if you cast your mind back, you may remember that in August 22, we started with a branch survey on violence and aggression. And in Western Dunbartonshire, what came back is that 66% of colleagues were saying that they were experiencing daily violent and aggressive incidents, and that 70% of the feedback that we got said that teachers said that these involve physical acts of violence. Now, this mirrored the national survey that violence and aggression was increasing in frequency and intensity, and with data to support that COVID and unmet ASN needs was exacerbating this, and also how this was affecting workloads, but also the increase in work-related stress as well. Now, off the back of that survey, there was some national guidance sent out from headquarters to support the work locally and at branch level that was being done and that needed to be done. So this was sent out, and Mick and Jim would have shared this with the reps during that the time that was sent out. But there was a number of actions that are contained in this list that headquarters, off the back of the survey responses, were saying should be focused on. And certainly Western Dunbartonshire have been focused on a number of these. So things like staff being aware of local policies dealing with violence and aggression, and that these policies are being implemented, that incidents are being reported properly, that branches were being supported to work towards a culture of zero tolerance on violence and aggression, so that you're creating that culture shift and change within your workplaces where you are demanding safer and healthier workplaces. Seeking a review of incidents with SLT or head teacher and leadership team. Staff being appropriately trained on how to deal with violent and aggressive incidents, including de-escalation where appropriate and in which situations that was appropriate. And that staff should be fully supported following violent and aggressive incidents, because that should be the gold standard in all of these policies. And that most importantly, integral to all of this, is that risk assessments are, one, carried out, but also that they are appropriately reviewed. Now, some of you might be listening to this thinking, okay, that does go on in my school and happens in my school. Some of you may be thinking that doesn't, and it's very good that you're here today so that we can talk a wee bit more about this and that you get that appropriate advice and you're able to ask questions of us as well. So in terms of what's been happening locally, that advice went out nationally, and what's been happening locally in Western Dunbartonshire are a number of things. So there's been ongoing negotiations with Western Dunbartonshire management and all key aspects of this campaign, as Mick alluded to at the top of the conversation. There's been Stand Up for Quality Education campaigning and organising training for reps. We've sent information posters bespoke to Western Dunbartonshire out to all schools, and I've got one of those in the slides a wee bit later on. And if you wanted some of these posters, if you don't have them, I think Mick's got some left, or we can get some more printed and we can talk about that a wee bit later on. There's also been training for reps specifically on health, safety and wellbeing at work, and on risk assessments that we just did online last month in November as well. The other things that have been happening currently, Mick talked a wee bit that, but you maybe want to talk a wee bit more about this reporting system. But there's been a new reporting system that has been piloted. But Mick, as a result of this, you had said to me that the most recent data had said that reporting, because of that new system, had increased by over 100%. Is that correct?
Yeah, it massively increased. So that obviously gave concern all round. What we wanted to emphasise too was that it wasn't an increase in the necessarily in the violence that was taking place, but it was better reporting of the very things that had been happening for a long period of time, and that we were petitioning on the basis of the fact that it was been underreported. So the system that we've got that was piloted among 10 schools gave people direct opportunity to report without the time-consuming aspect of having to get together with management, sit down and discuss the matter, fill in a lengthy HS1 form. And people in management were telling us it was taking them ages to do it. It was taking a huge chunk of their working week to actually get involved in the completion of these forums. So it was hopefully a win-win all round, where it reduced the workload for management and it raised the profile of what schools needed in the way of resources. It's not to blame individuals in terms of what's happening. It's fundamentally to highlight and make visible what the problem is in schools, so that the resources that are needed are put into schools where they're needed. So that's the purpose of it, is to make the whole thing visible for everybody.
So the Holy Grail is, and this is what's contained in this poster, is that incidents do need to be reported in school for management to support and action. Every school should have a system of reviewing the data reported in their school through health and safety procedures, and that every violent incident should result in a risk assessment with effective measures put in place and reviewed after every incident. Yes, so where incidents are repeated, the risk assessment has been deemed to be ineffective. It must be revised. Now, it's not just in Western Dunbartonshire, but I'm in and out of schools up and down the country. And we're consistently getting the same feedback from members in branches that often risk assessments might be there in the first instance, but when an incident occurs, it is very difficult to get them, sit down with management to get them reviewed. Now, it is a workload driver, but it is very, very important this procedural paperwork is done. Now, the EIS had redrafted and reviewed their policy for dealing with violent and aggressive behaviour in the classroom. The key headlines of that are report, 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 risk assess, risk assess, risk assess. And the reason that is because there has to be data collected in a paper trail on any instances within your workplace that you feel is unsafe. So say it's to do with a particular pupil. If a very grave incident occurs and you want to escalate this issue and you want support from your union to do that, the union area officers will ask for all the procedural paperwork that you've carried out. If there hasn't been reports on these incidents, if risk assessments haven't been done, if there's nothing to evidence that this child was a risk or that their behaviour was a risk, then there's nothing to build a grievance on. There is nothing to build a case on. And similarly, if you are going to try and hold your employer to account by saying that they've lacked in their duty of care, the lawyers acting for their behalf will do exactly the same thing. If there is no procedural paperwork, if there is no incident forms, if there's nothing being filled out, then they will say your employer hasn't failed in their duty of care because there was no foreseeability. That is why it's very, very important that you have to fill out the forms in the due process that is stated for Western Dunbartonshire. Mick, we've talked before about instances where this has happened, where there's been an issue in a school for health and safety, if it's been a particular pupil, and we've had no paperwork as evidence to back it up.
Yeah, it's absolutely crucial that the risk assessments are done. They're time consuming. part of the problem is that the resources that are really needed in order to reduce the risk very often are not there. They're not there through the cuts that everybody has been suffering. We have made our political representations to local politicians on the fact that the cuts are damaging to what's happening in schools. The last round of cuts fundamentally we weren't listened to in terms of it. It didn't make the difference, and the cuts were basically went ahead. We're now in the position where we're beginning to look at a new wave of cuts coming into schools. We're already at the point where the vast number of management across Western Dunbartonshire have got to spend considerable amounts of time actually in schools because the cover and supply budget is so limited that now we can't bring in teachers. So people in management who would otherwise be there supporting staff and managing the school and providing a direction of travel for the school in general are finding themselves back in the classroom again. So all of these things are reducing the overall effectiveness of what it is going on in our schools. And this is what we are trying to bring to everybody's attention to minimise the impact across the board.
Brilliant, thanks. And so this is the poster that we sent out close to the start of the school year, wasn't it, Mick? That we designed specifically for West Dunbartonshire. Yep. So if you don't have one of these in any visible space within your workplace, if you email myself, dmatthew@eis.org.uk, I'll put my email in the chat, or email directly to Mick, and you need more printed up, Mick, we'll get that and we can send some more out to people in branches that don't have them.
Yeah, just as an update as well, as a reminder, our email address is actually on the calendars that we supply to every school at the beginning of the year. The email address is direct to our EIS email, so it's westdunbartonshire@eis.org.uk, but that's on the calendar for reference as well as my contact number and Jim's contact number on there as well. Yeah.
Brilliant. I'm just quickly trying to type that as you're saying that. Hopefully I've got it right. Excellent stuff. Okay, next slide.
Thanks, Steve.
No bother. So what should you expect from your employer? Well, your employer does have absolutely a duty of care for your health, safety and well-being at work, and risk assessments are absolutely central to this. They're not optional, they are absolutely essential. In terms of the act that comes out of, it's the Health and Safety at Work Act 1974. But through risk assessments, your employer ensures that your workplace is safe and hazard-free. There's 5 steps to a risk assessment: to identify the hazard, to decide who might be harmed and how, to evaluate the risks and decide on precautions, to record your findings in a place where they are accessible, and that everyone who's working in that situation or potentially with that child has access to these risk assessments so that they can see them. That is a right to be able to, and to be able to review these risk assessments and update if necessary. And our advice would be, after any incident, and that's your professional judgment, where you feel that that risk assessment needs to be reviewed, then you put a communication to management in order to do that. Now, what you would do in that instance is you would speak to your rep if you've got a rep in place. If you don't, then you might want to email Mick or Jim at West Dunbartonshire Local Association to get support, to maybe put a form of words together or communication to management to say, this risk assessment needs to be reviewed. I would like to ask for a sit down in order to do that in a timely fashion. This is about, feeling safe in the workplace, and these are appropriate documentation that we need to fill out. Now, in terms of risk assessments, the person that is responsible to fill that out is the person that's been trained to do that, and that should be a member of senior management. However, if it's a particular classroom situation or a particular child that's been worked with, You also have to, as the staff member working in that situation with that child, have input to that risk assessment being done. But it is not you that signs it off. It is the trained member of staff that has to sign off that risk assessment. So nobody should be in a position where they're writing risk assessments if they're not trained, or signing off risk assessments if they are not that key named individual. It should be a member of senior management as a representative of your employer that fills out these risk assessments and that signs them off at the end of the day, and that is responsible for being the person that is involved in reviewing them if a situation happens where you feel that that risk assessment is not fit for purpose. So that is absolutely your expectation of your employer for a health and safe workplace, and through these use of risk assessments, but it has to be done by a trained person. So what we would advise in terms of school level action to support stand up for quality education is a number of things. So firstly, ensure that you've got a rep in your school. If you do not have a rep in your school, that's where I come in. I can help you find out more about the rep role. I can help your branch elect a rep. I can help with training and the role of the rep, but also in managing and organising your branch as well. We would also advise that once you have a rep in situ, that you should be having regular meetings to bring anything of concern in a forum with your colleagues, union colleagues, where you can talk about that. But also what we're really encouraging people is to have a health and safety rep in your branches, but also to set up a health and safety committee in school. Now, health and safety committees aren't just ad hoc committees. They are a group of people that are coming together to ask their employer to sit down and plan strategic meetings throughout the year where you bring issues of health and safety to them. Now, once you put in a request for a health and safety committee within your workplace, your employer cannot ignore that. They have to respond to that. Now, typically what you would do is you would do that as the EIS, which are the largest trade union membership in most of our branches, but you would also do that maybe with a colleague and representative of one of the other teaching unions within your workplace, or maybe one of your unison colleagues that are coming from the support staff as well. You would then put that request in writing to your employer. If you're feeling that your workplace is not safe, we would like to have a health and safety committee where there's periodic reviews of issues around health and safety. Your employer must respond to that. So senior management must respond to that. And while you would have a group of people from the employee side and the union side, they would equally have a set number of people from the management side. And then you would agree on a schedule of meetings throughout the year where you bring these issues. Now, remember, this is something that if you start and set up, your employer is maybe going to rest on their laurels a little bit. It would be down to the union side to make sure that they're pushing and ensuring these meetings are taking place. So again, it is a workload driver, but it's the start of changing that culture within your workplace. And through health and safety committees, as I've said, your employer cannot ignore you. So you're bringing and increasing that visibility of health, safety and well-being into your workplace. Also, you may already have some kind of committee within your school that does the negotiatings around working time agreements. So if you don't have a negotiating committee, maybe you want to coalesce around issues of health and safety and then start your committee from there. But if you've got your negotiating committee, perhaps you could add some other individuals into that to support with the health and safety stuff as well. Because the other way that you have in terms of having agency around your well-being and your work load in your workplace is through your working time agreement. So I don't know if you will have seen this image. This was repackaged and rebranded during Stand Up for Quality Education when it was launched. But Mick, in terms of this particular graphic, you have a different negotiated agreement within West Dunbartonshire, don't you, that's different to the rest of the picture nationally, specifically when it comes to collegiate hours, don't you?
Yeah, well, there's two things. Basically, the collegiate hours that we have, it's 190 collegiate hours a year. The collegiate hours are based on 5 hours a week over the 38 weeks, five of the days, which make up the remaining to make it 39 weeks, 5 of the days are in-service days. So it's around the collegiate hours associated with those other weeks that are non in-service days. So that's where the 190 hours comes from. In primary, we have a local agreement that 50 additional hours onto the core preparation and correction time will be allocated. So from the 190 hours of collegiate time, 50 of those hours are additional preparation and correction in the primary sector in particular, because the workload in primary sector was fully recognised to be way over the top in terms of preparation, and as a result, 50 hours additional time was allocated for that. However, across the country, it's recognised that teachers are doing about 11 hours more per week. In West Dunbartonshire, the survey that we had showed an average of 8 hours per week across the board for people working beyond their contractual time. So that's their personal time, and that at the end of the day is personal family time, and it's basically been used for work commitment in order to keep people's head above water and to deliver the kind of education that they feel secure in. So the bottom line is that we need to control that. We need to make sure that the working time agreements don't overstep the mark and that people can get their work done within the 35 hours. And just to emphasise a point that Dee's making about the health and safety side of things, most people have grown to health and safety and thinking it's about slips and trips and falls and fire hydrants around, fire extinguishers around schools and so on. And these things are all important, of course, but the real issues around health and safety that have developed over the last number of years are to do with people's mental health and well-being. And that comes from the stress associated with workload being out of control and the issues around behaviour that are going on in schools. So those are key things that need to be examined within the health and safety committees within schools, where they look at the number of reports that are coming in violent and aggressive behaviour, where they look at the number of issues that are arising in relation to workload and stress on people. And when people are stressed at their work, they very often just plod along until they get to a point that they can't sleep at night, they can't get rest and relaxation in the normal way, simply because of the fact that they're constantly overburdened. And that happens at all levels within the system. And therefore, we need to make sure that people don't reach that burnout stage by it being controlled through health and safety committees in school that are looking at these main trigger points. Thanks, Steve.
Brilliant. So your working time agreements, this is something that you guys have been doing within your sector for nearly 20 years now, since the Millennium Agreement, more than 20 years. So you would think that most branches are pretty au fait in the process of negotiating this. Unfortunately, I do go into branches, not just in West Dunbartonshire, but in other areas as well, where it's still not a streamlined process within schools. If you are sitting in your branch and you're having any issues with doing your working time agreement, please contact myself or Mick. We will come in and we'll do a branch meeting specifically on the process of working time agreements. It is your main mechanism through which you control your workload. It should be a negotiated settlement. It is not within senior management's gift just to tell you what's going to be in your working time agreement. It should be absolutely informed by the staff side in terms of how they audit, how much time things take them. That should inform your working time agreement. It should also be signed off and set. And once it is signed off, things can't be introduced in by management just on a whim. There may sometimes come things partway through the year where management say, we have to feed this in. In that case, it gives you as a branch the tool to be able to say, well, okay, but it's not in the working time agreement. So if we're adding this in, then what do we take out? It is absolutely integral, this document, for you to be able to control your workload and say what your expectations are around that. So if you are struggling with it, then please reach out. Don't be sitting there thinking that there isn't help there, because myself, Mick, Jim are absolutely there to call on to support you in these things. So what we should be saying, what we're really trying to get across today is to ensure that your working time agreement is that there's knowledge of that, and that if you need support with that, please let us know. But also ensuring that there's a focus on this procedural paperwork around health and safety, so reporting every incident that occurs. Also, that you are ensuring that there's someone trained within your workplace to carry out risk assessments and to sign off risk assessments. And that if you're having trouble getting risk assessments reviewed after an incident, that you're reaching out again to us for support and being able to support you in ensuring that that gets done. If you don't have a rep within your school, think about getting one. Again, I can support within the process of all of that. If you don't have a health and safety rep, it's very important to get a health and safety rep. It doesn't always have to be, if you have no rep in place, that you start off with one person. You can start off with a committee, but it would be good to coalesce that committee around issues of health and safety as well, under the context or within the context of Stand Up for Quality Education. One of the things that Mick said was really important today is to make sure that everybody knows that there is support available. Mick, I see that you've got your hand up. Did you want to jump in there?
Yeah, just to add to that as well, the working time agreement is a live document that should be getting reviewed at various times in the year. You should be sitting down and looking at it and looking at the time allocated to various tasks, and to ensure that those tasks can be overtaken within the time allowed. If the task is outstripped the time available, then there needs to be a review of what's going on for the rest of the year for everybody. And at directorate level, we have a committee at JCC, and within that committee, it's been completely recognised exactly what you referred to earlier, Dee, which is if new initiatives come in during the year, then something else has got to drop out the working time agreement in order to do that. There's absolutely no objection to that, but there's got to be a redrawing of priorities throughout the year if something different comes into the picture as the year develops. And we've been encouraged to get that message out, that it's not a case of just keeping on adding to the working time agreement as the year goes on. It's a case of removing elements from it in order to let anything new that is a have to take place. Thanks for that, Dean.
When we were chatting earlier on in the phone, Mick, you were saying about the importance of gathering data through the use of surveys. Now, that's really pertinent in terms of negotiating your working time agreement, but also colleagues' experiences of violence and aggression in the workplace as well. Do you want to say a wee bit more on surveys?
Yeah, thanks, Dee. There's a big survey coming out for headquarters. They decided this year that rather than do a number of smaller surveys throughout the year, that they would do one big one, and that they would gather the information from that one large survey. So there is a survey coming out within the next few weeks. They may actually postpone it to after Christmas, given the time of year that we're hitting. But just to emphasise, and as I said, was saying to Dee on the phone earlier, it wasn't something that I really sort of realised the impact of myself. But when you sit down, either locally or nationally, and you have conversations such as teachers have experienced a lot of violence in schools, that kind of washes over the top of people. But if you sit down and you say 82% of teachers report, then that's a vastly different conversation. And it makes such a difference to the emphasis of the points that you're making when you've got statistics to back those points up. So the surveys are absolutely crucial. And we would ask you yourselves, that are guys that are on this, but we would ask you also to encourage your colleagues and to make sure that surveys that are completed, that they are absolutely crucial to the union to gather information. And I'm involved in a number of national committees, and we sit down with people for the Scottish Government, the non-political side of it. Generally, it's the civil servants, and the same at COSLA. And when we have got hard and fast statistics to give them, then that changes the whole dynamics of the conversation, and it's absolutely crucial to getting things done. So do fill in your surveys and do encourage your colleagues to fill them in as well. Yeah.
So not just at national level, but the use of surveys at branch level as well is really essential. So as I said, when you're negotiating your working time agreement, if you're using Microsoft Forms to quickly survey your colleagues on the time spent doing certain activities, then that is really solid stuff that you can take when you're doing your negotiating with management side as well. Or again, if it's related to health and safety, you could do a quick survey within your branch of stress at work or certain issues that are causing stressors. And then again, that is key solid data that you can take to management when you're saying this situation needs to change, or this piece of work is too much, or that the branch feels this. If you've got actual data to back that up, it's really, really important. So that's a tool that you can use in your toolbox just for doing your branch level organising as well. So really
Could I
that
maybe
was,
say on that,
yeah,
Jane,
yeah, carry on.
that if people are a bit unfamiliar as to how to present a survey using the technology available to them in schools, then if they come to us and we don't have the answers, then at least we know somebody that does have the answers and can help them out. So if anybody wants a bit of coaching in terms of how to construct surveys that they can send out to members to make life a wee bit easier for themselves, then we can certainly lend a hand with regard to that. Yeah.
100%. I mean, literally, it is my role as well to support in doing that, and to help reps and branches to run their branch. So any training related to the role of the rep or branch organising, I can absolutely come in to your school and visit a time that's convenient for you to help you with. So that was really a kind of whistle stop tour. It was quite a lot of information. I understand that, but sort of the key headlines in all of this is just ensuring that if you don't have a rep in place, then please do. If you do have a rep, that you're calling regular meetings of your colleagues so that you're getting together and talking about any issues related to workload, related to health and safety. That if you don't have a health and safety rep, think about getting one or setting up your own health and safety committee, that you're thinking about the production of your risk assessments, who's doing them, is there a trained person, how are they being produced, who's signing them off. Also thinking about, is there a school level behaviour policy? If not, seeking support from myself, Mick or Jim, and how you would approach creating one or reviewing one that you feel is not fit for purpose. Making sure that you are focused on your working time agreement as well, that it is being negotiated, that it's something that you feel that you all have a hand in. And if you don't, again, reaching out and we can organise some branch level training about working time agreements as well. Like I said, there's a number of things happen nationally, conversations around all of the three strands of the Stand Up for Quality Education campaign. But as Mick spoke about a couple of times, there is a major national survey coming out, which will inform the next steps of the campaign. So it's being reviewed at the moment. As Mick said, it might be out next week, or it could be the turn of the year before it comes out. But when that does come out, please engage in it, because it will inform the next steps of the Stand Up for Quality Education campaign as well. So I'm just going to hand back to Mick. I don't know if Jim was going to say a couple of words, but there might be some time for questions if anybody's got some questions, Mick.
Yeah, okay, brilliant. Yeah, just to emphasise on the 21-hour issue as well. We're beginning nationally to ratchet up the pressure in terms of that. There was the lettering, the emailing to MSPs on that. All the political parties had made promises before the last election that they would increase teacher numbers. they all said it would be a minimum of 3,000 additional teachers that would be across the country. The SNP had put the figure to 3,500. That would have allowed us to introduce the 21 hours during the course of this Parliament, and they've not met that promise. So we're still holding our feet to the fire in the fact that they were elected on that basis. And that wasn't a promise just to teachers. That was a promise to everybody across the country, to parents, to children, to teachers, that they were going to improve the quality of education by allowing teachers better and more time for preparation and correction. And at this point, they haven't delivered on that. So we are now ratcheting up the pressure on them. And the campaign for that will be continuing in the new year. At the moment, the campaign focused on emailing MSPs, but it'll go further than that. And eventually, we'll be declaring a dispute if they don't come up with the goods in terms of it. Now, you declare a dispute, it moves the ball game to something a bit more determined in terms of the union's approach to it. It doesn't necessarily mean direct industrial action by any means at that stage, but if they're not going to come up with that, then that's certainly the direction of travel for us. So that's going to be a big issue in terms of reducing teacher workload. And it's crucial to that is the fact that the additional non-contact time should be within the control of the teacher. As I've brought on numerous occasions to SNCT meetings, if a teacher is teaching an hour, they've got 20 minutes for preparation and correction. In a primary school, if they've got 4 groups, they've got 5 minutes per group to prepare and correct everything for every hour's worth that they would teach a particular group within that class. And it's just an absurdity that people are expected to produce quality learning and teaching with that level of preparation time been allocated to them. So there is absolutely no reason why the additional preparation correction time should go anywhere else other than to assist teachers to do their preparation and correction in a slightly more reasonable amount of time. But do bear in mind, it's only going to mean minutes, rather than taking it to the level that it's actually needed. So that's going to be a big bit of business in the new year. And yeah, I'll hand over to Jim at this point.
Thanks very much, Mick. I was actually just going to come in and sum up. From what Dee was saying, I was just wondering if there was any questions for the small time that we've got left. Does anybody have anything that they need to ask? Nothing coming through? No. Good, that's excellent. Hopefully, I have a question about cover, Simon. Go for it, Simon. Where are you? I can't see it. If you've asked that question, Simon, I can't see it.
Hello, can you hear me?
Oh yeah, just shout out. Yeah.
Can now.
It's a question. It's an issue about cover that we've had recently, which is the number that the I would say the inability to deal with the amount of absences. We've got huge numbers of staff out on sick or events and things like that, and there are classes getting covered like centrally sent to the hall sort of thing. Now that to me moves us into the area of supervision and not into the area of education. And if it had just been once or twice, I could understand it, but it's now becoming the norm in the last few weeks. And I'm just really looking for some guidance and some where we go, because it's certainly not quality education. I don't send my son to school to be supervised. I send him there to be educated. Now, it might just be the time of the year and flu pandemics and all the rest of it, but my worry is we go into the new year. We know we've got problems with teacher recruitment and the number of posts that are supplied, but I really think it's a huge amount of pressure on schools and normal school business and people needing to go to funerals and hospital appointments and these sort of things are potentially being impacted? Thank you.
Yeah, I think in the first instance, we need to know about all of that. I mean, that won't just be happening in OLSP where Simon's from. It'll be happening elsewhere, I would imagine. And we've got to know right away that it's happening. Now, our dealings with management to a great extent, we find that they're just looking at us when we make complaints because their hands are tied by the lack of resources. It becomes an issue for us to raise with the political leaders in the council. And I think examples, that type of example that you have given there, Simon, is important that we express that to the council leaders, because they're obviously concerned about their relationship with their voters, the people who have elected them. And I think at times we have to go to that level, if not to embarrass them, at least to show it publicly in order to make them think, what are our electors actually saying about that? So that's what we would be doing. We'd be raising it at that level, but we do need to know as quickly as possible from every school that that's happening in. Okay, and on that, Mick.
Thanks, Jim. Well, a similar point was brought up at the Committee of Management recently, and we're emailing the directorate team about the concerns. It's not just one secondary school, there's more than one, and the primaries have been hard hit in terms of cover availability too. So it's right across the board that's happening, and you know, there really needs to be more resources, as you indicated, Jim, and it needs to be the political decisions that need to be made to put those resources into schools. Yeah.
Anybody else? Any further questions? I pause to give you times to figure out how to work your computer. No, nothing there. Okay then. I think we'll begin to draw this to a conclusion. I think I was going to summarise, but Dee's so good that she's actually summarised it herself. So that's excellent. I'd have to say that from the outset, Dee said that this is about teacher empowerment, and that's absolutely correct. We've got to understand what we can and cannot do, and what we can do is quite substantial, particularly working through the union and the way in which we can take it to management and possibly get things done. Again, Dee has gone on about making the workplace a healthier environment. That's absolutely crucial to us. I mean, in the past, it might have been about whether the classroom was clean, but nowadays, as Mick indicated, it's about mental health and the ability to control that and the impact that would have upon us. What we need coming from meetings like this, and as we go into the new year, we need to, our members and our reps need to have a confidence. They need to have a confidence in themselves that they can actually achieve things within the school rather than just sitting back and maybe expecting myself and Mick or maybe a rep to achieve anything. Every teacher should have that confidence and not to be bullied. Not that every teacher is bullied, but we have within some schools stronger influences from senior management than in maybe in other schools, and we may find that difficult at times. What we need to understand is that the working time agreement is an agreement. It cannot go ahead without the agreement of the teachers. So that's fundamental to our understanding and the belief that we can be confident. Also, the risk assessments are an agreement. We don't put our name to anything that we don't agree with. And very often, risk assessments, as we've found, can be conducted and done without the knowledge of the teacher involved. And we must understand that we have an input into that, and there needs to be a paper trail, as Dee has said. Paper trails are really, really important for us. Even if you're stopped in the corridor for a chat with a member of your head teacher or senior management, and something your head teacher says, something that they are going to do, and you're not sure of how that is going to progress, what you do is you go back and you write your head teacher or member of senior management an email saying, further to our conversation in the corridor, do I understand correctly you're intending to do, so that they have to come back with their email. And that gives us a paper trail that we can use and we can go back on. And that becomes very, very important. Clearly, we all know that pupil behaviour is an increasing problem, that the levels of violence, whether it be verbal or physical violence, or the threat of violence, has increased dramatically. The figures that now we have within West Dunbartonshire now show a substantial rise. We have been arguing for many years that what we were getting in terms of reports of violence were underreported. We were normally getting between 200 and 300 per quarter. Now that this pilot has started, we were now getting 700 instead. And that's a much clearer example. And that was only from a few schools. Once it goes out to all schools, there will be a substantial rise in that. And we would expect at that point for the elected members, the councillors, to take note of that. The workload is incredible, as we all know, despite the fact that staffing levels are now down because they're having to cut to the bone, as Laura Mason and others have said. They are now cut to the bone, and further next year they will be cut further to the bone, and workload will increase in that respect. In terms of ASN, we're losing support staff, and again the level of work and workload is going to increase upon us. The level of class contact time is higher in Scotland than in other countries throughout Western Europe, and that's an indication of the level at which we're working. We were told 4 years ago in the manifesto that we would get a reduction in our workload and they would recruit 3,500 teachers, as Mick indicated, and we're still looking for that. This, to me, is a deliberate delay because they're looking to use the money elsewhere. And this is something, as Mick says, we'll hold their feet to the fire on that. It will be, and has always been, zero tolerance to violence. The employer has a duty of care. Now, we bring that up to them every time, and again, it's almost a silence. But as Dee indicated in that law, the employment law, we have the right to take legal action against them. And it may well come to that we will take up some of the cases and confront West Dunbartonshire Council or the Scottish Government, whoever it happens to be. And therefore, the employer, I had written down here, employer has a duty of care, and I put a wee smiley face beside it because they're really laughing at us. And the reality is, unless we take it up and on that duty of care, they will continue to do what they are doing on a national scale. I agree with Dee. It becomes absolutely crucial that a health and safety committee has got to be set up, and again, it cannot be denied. But really, just in a final point in terms of what we do, I think as reps in particular, we don't always wait for colleagues to come to us. Many colleagues will suffer workload, mental health problems, and they'll suffer it in silence, and they'll go to their class and they'll do their work, and then they'll go home and they'll express that among their family, and that problem becomes a bigger issue for them. So for reps, I think reps have got to go to their members, they've got to talk to their members consistently on a regular basis to find out how they're feeling, how they're doing, rather than just waiting for their members to come to them. Can I say in conclusion, I have to say I'm pleased with the numbers that have turned out today. I thank you for turning up. I'd like to thank Dee for an excellent presentation. Without Dee and the work that Dee puts in, we would not get through half of this. So I thank you very much for that, Dee. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I wish you all a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and I hope everything goes well for you over the next few months. And as far as I'm concerned, over the next few years. But thanks anyway. Mick.
Thanks very much for that, Jim. And I'd just like to end on the closing note. Sadly, Jim's decided to hang up his boxing gloves for his union life at the moment. It started this 10 years ago. I managed to persuade him to not think about retirement for a wee while and to come and join me and work in this. He said he would do it for a year or two, and that was 10 years ago. So you've certainly stayed longer than your original promise, Jim, and you'll be missed by everybody, but most of all by myself. So cheers on that.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks to everybody, and good night. Thank you very much.
Right.
Okay, thanks a
Thanks,
lot.
everybody. Right.
Bye.
Thanks.